My name is Jared Vagey. I'm a doctor of physiotherapy, a professor at the University of Southern California, and the author of the international best-selling book, Climb Injury Free.
And I'm Matt DiStefano. I'm also a doctor of physical therapy. I work down in San Diego, California, and I'm also one of the coaches for the Mesa Rim competitive climbing team.
The two of us decided to team up to take you through how to make a pulley protection splint.
And we will get into more details as to what a pulley protection splint is later in the video, but we were just going to offer some information to the climbing community at large to help people with pulley injuries.
We're here with Ross Wilkerson. Ross, can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hey guys, I'm a three-time youth national champion. Back in 2018, I received the North Face Young Gun Award, and I've been pretty fortunate through my climbing career to not get too many injuries, and I want to keep that going for as long as possible, so I'm really excited to be here with these guys and work through this process.
All right, well Ross, you ready to get going?
Absolutely, let's get it.
All right, let's do it. But before we make the pulley protection splint, we first need to learn the anatomy of the finger. Let's take a look. As you can see here, Matt is holding an anatomical hand model. We have the bones in the wrist and the fingers. We have the ligaments, known as the pulleys. And we have the tendons, the flexor digitorum superficialis, as well as the flexor digitorum profundus. Let's take a closer look at the anatomy.
So as you can see here, we've got the bones of the wrist, the hand, and the fingers. And in blue and in red, we have the tendons. One tendon is for the flexor digitorum superficialis, right here in blue. And then extending all the way out to the last phalanx is the flexor digitorum profundus, muscle tendon. And then right here, indicated by the tan tape, we have the annular pulleys. And we have the A1, the 2, 3, 4, and 5. And if you look at the difference between the two fingers, right here on the middle finger, we have intact pulleys, and here we've tried to indicate a ruptured A2 pulley of the ring finger.
So Matt, we went through the anatomy of the hand. Now, can you tell us a little bit about the importance of a pulley protection splint?
Right, so if someone were to rupture one of their pulleys, traditionally it was repaired with surgery to basically essentially replace the pulley and put it back in place. But what they found over time is that you can treat a pulley rupture conservatively. So the importance of the pulley protection splint is to essentially do the job of the pulley in the healing phase for roughly 6 to 8 weeks. And the reason why we use a pulley protection splint is because the hard thermoplastic helps to keep that tendon approximated to the bone so that you can have proper scarring down of the tissue that will essentially take the place of the pulley that has been ruptured into the future. And they've shown that tape is not sufficient enough, so that's why we use the plastic pulley protection splint. So as we can see here in the model, the tendons with a ruptured pulley, we have an increase in space between the tendon and the bone underneath. So what we're trying to accomplish with a pulley protection splint is trying to approximate the tendon bone distance, and by using a thermoplastic ring, the pulley protection splint, we're able to do so safely.
Excellent. So let's go through this. Let's go step by step exactly how we would fabricate, how we would make this, the tools that are needed. Then let's apply it to a real person.
Excellent.
Now before we get started, we want to give a special thanks to Dr. Andy Schweizer and Dr. Volker Schoeffel, two prominent surgeons out of Europe.
Thank you very much for your help, guys.
All right, Matt, so let's go step by step through exactly what we need to make the pulley protection splints. Okay. And know that as you're watching these videos or you're looking at this blog entry or this paper, that there are asterisks over the items that you need to have. And then there's ones that are nice to have. We're going to show all of them. Now first, it's nice to have a splint pan. You need something to heat up the water to mold the splint. And at the bottom of the pan we have netting, as well as a thermometer on it to tell the temperature. Now a little dirtbag tip, if you don't want to go out and buy this, then you can just use a stove as well as a pot to heat the water to mold. We additionally have here, this is a heat gun. And the heat gun is nice to have. The heat gun allows you to round the edges of the splint to make it a little bit more comfortable. And there's a clamp that's holding it or attaching it to the table. You can also see that we have needle nose pliers. So when you're molding the pulley protection splint and you're smoothing the edges, it's nice to hold it with pliers. You can see as well we have a utility knife. Matt, tell us about the utility knife and some of the materials that we'll also use.
Okay, so the reason why we have a utility knife here is, so this is the piece of thermoplastic. As you can see, it is very, very dense and very strong. So to cut the strips that we need, you'll take the utility knife, you will score it multiple times, and then once you have a nice groove in there, you will snap it and it will snap into the shape that you need. Following, we have just a standard pen and a marker. Those will be used to mark the template that you will essentially just, shape out of a strip of paper towel. And that will essentially be the pattern or the template that will be the plastic piece. Next, we have a China marker here. It's essentially a waterproof wax marker. But as you can see, the plastic that we have is a dark color, so neither of these pens will show up on here. So if we use this, we can mark that. And next we have, this is called a mandrel. This is traditionally used to size rings. And as we're making pulley protection splints or a pulley ring, this is going to come in handy. But we also have these two strips of wiring, 16-2 gauge wiring here. And the importance of having this wire is, so as we're making the pulley protection splint, we want to make sure that there is a space on the side of the fingers on both sides to protect the vasculature.
So the wiring is nice, and there's two methods we'll go over. The method with the mandrel, where you attach the wiring to the mandrel. And the second method, the method of the finger, where you attach the wire directly to the finger. Additionally, to adhere the pulley protection splint, we're going to use Leukotape. And we have a Moleskin as well to give it some padding.
Okay.
You can use scissors, and the scissors are going to allow you to cut the pulley protection splint when you're molding it. And you can use curved scissors or straight scissors.
Okay.
So I believe, Matt, that's everything we have on our list. Oh, well, no, actually, there's one more thing.
I think you forgot something. It's really important.
The soap. You have to have the soap.
Okay.
So you have to be able to put the soap into the pot to allow the material not to stick as much. So I think we're covered. Is that everything?
The soap's important, but there's actually an even more important piece.
What's more important?
Well, you need a spatula to be able to get your plastic out, but I mean, who doesn't like Alex Honnold? This is the specifically Alex Honnold foundation piece from Black Diamond. So
nice. All right.
if you want to make splints in style, go with that.
Yeah, any spatula will do, but splints in style, and go with Alex Honnold.
Yeah.
Let's get to work.
Boom. Okay, now we're going to show you how we modified our mandrel. So as you can see here on this side, we already have this side assembled. And essentially what we're trying to show is the necessary function of having the bump out on the side. As we mentioned earlier, the vasculature of the finger is on the sides, so that is why we have the wiring. So what you'll need to do is cut a very thin strip of double-sided tape that we see here on the wire. And then you want to make sure that they're exactly 180 degrees from each other on the mandrel. So if I take my positioning here, I'm going to lay this down onto the mandrel. And before I fully commit to where it's placed, I'm just going to assess to make sure that it's fully 180 degrees opposite on the cylindrical mandrel. And I'm just going to press down to make sure that it's nice and sturdy. And now, as we can see here, we have the mandrel with, on both sides, we have the wiring adhered using the double-sided tape. To make sure that that part is fastened, we're going to use some thin strips of Leukotape. So you basically just need one at the very tips. So I'm going to wrap this around nice and tight. And again, this just makes sure that when you're using the mandrel and you're using this as the template for molding the pulley protection splint, that nothing is going to shift on you as you're doing so. So again, just putting some nice tight Leukotape circumferentially around the mandrel. And again, what that does is it just helps to fasten the very ends of the wiring to make sure that it doesn't come off.
The splinting material that we recommend using is 1/8 inch prism material that has a moderate resistance to stretch. When you buy this material, it's going to come in a large sheet just like this. I'm going to take you through how to score the material and cut it down into a smaller sheet so you can use it for a pulley protection splint. The material by 10 cent. First, you'll need to score the material 10 centimeters by approximately 2.5 centimeters for the pulley protection splint. You'll take the utility knife and you'll measure out about 2.5 centimeters and you'll score a line down the material, just like so. You'll then follow up and score a second line directly in the groove of that first, and then you'll do a third, just like so. After you've then scored the material, you can then start to bend the material. You notice as it bends, it starts to separate a little bit, and you can bend it so it almost is about to break. Now, instead of using your thumbs and blowing through your thumbs, because you want to save those for climbing as well as your fingers, you do one more score with the utility knife, going directly down that line that you made. And now you should easily be able to bend, fold, and break in the right exact width and length that you need. So this is going to be approximately 10 centimeters by 2.5 centimeters, so you can have enough room to make that pulley protection splint. So first we're going to start with heating the water. And you'll need to have a splint pan, and here we're just using a skillet, as well as some netting to protect the bottom of the pan when you have the splint in it. Additionally, there's a thermometer on top to measure the temperature of the water. So first you're going to pour some water into the splint pan. You want to pour the water about 50% of the pan. Next, you're going to add some soap to the water. Now the soap makes it so the materials from the splint don't adhere to the pan. You're then going to heat the water. And you can see here there's a gauge on this particular skillet. You'll plug it in and you'll set that skillet to 160 degrees. And you can use the external thermometer or the one on the skillet to monitor and measure the water itself.
All right, Ross, so the first thing we're going to do is get a pretty rough estimate of the size of your finger here. So what we're going to do is basically just have a pretty basic piece of paper towel, and we roughly cut it out to about 2.5 centimeters by 10 centimeters. And what I'm going to do here, I want it to be pretty much the exact circumference of your finger. So I'm just going to see where those overlap. Put a mark on there with my marker. Take this off, and then I'm just going to trim that little excess. Okay, so now after we get the measurement, we're going to use the mandrel here because this is what we're going to form it to using one of the methods. Nice. So on your finger, I wrapped it around until the pieces touch. So I'm going to find that space. So we're at about 7 or 7.5, the 7.5 mark on the mandrel. Okay, so we'll just remember that for when we're molding it. I bring it down to this same exact spot.
Sweet.
Okay.
All right, Ross. So now we're going to heat for the first time this thermoplastic material, so we can then put it on a template of a paper towel and cut it to your finger.
Awesome, let's do it.
You want to do the honors?
Sure.
Drop it in. All right, let's go for it. After the splint material is finished heating, remove it with a spatula. You can do this to protect your fingers. Make sure that the material is pliable and bendable so that you can cut it. You'll then take the pre-cut paper towel, place it on the splinting material. Cut around the paper towel so that the splinting material is the same size as a pre-cut, pre-measured paper towel. Okay, Ross, now that we cut this to the paper towel template, we're now either going to mold it directly to your finger or we'll use a mandrel. So maybe let's do rock, paper, scissors.
Okay. Oh, I gotta go with the rock.
You won. All right. So for the second time, let's go ahead and heat this material. Drop it in. All right. Next step.
Sweet.
After the thermoplastic material is moldable, remove it from the splint pan. You'll be using this material to mold around your custom-made mandrel on the exact location that is predetermined by the sizing of the patient's finger. Wrap the thermoplastic material around the mandrel, making sure to press firmly into the edges to create those vascular bulges. You also want to make sure that there's a slit or opening at the edge of the material. You can see here the bird's eye view looking down through the pulley protection splint molded on the mandrel. You'll see the gauge wire creates those vascular bulges. You can also see how it fits perfectly around a cylindric surface so that it can fit on your finger. After the thermoplastic material hardens, slide it off of the mandrel. You will then take this material and dip the tips of it into the splint pan. So Ross, we molded this pulley protection splint, but sometimes there's these loose ends that can cut into the skin or become uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to dip this into the hot water and we'll be able to cut and trim those loose ends so it's more comfortable for you to feel.
Awesome.
By dipping the tips of it into the splint pan, we'll make that a little bit more moldable so that you can cut off or trim any excessive edges. You can see here a closer view of trimming the edges off of the splint.
All right, Ross, so now we've got the pulley protection splint that we molded on the mandrel, but you know the plastic has a lot of sharp and rough edges.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to hold with the pliers and use the heat gun to try to smooth some of those edges to make it more comfortable.
Sweet.
Okay.
Move the rough edges directly over the heat gun. Smooth those edges with your fingers or your thumb.
Okay, so now that we've smoothed some of the edges with the heat gun, we also want to add a little bit of Moleskin onto that because you're going to be wearing this 23 to 24 hours per day. You're going to be wearing it for 6 to 8 weeks, so we want to prevent some skin breakdown, and Moleskin is very useful for that. Okay, so let's put that on there.
To improve the comfort, as well as decrease skin breakdown while wearing the pulley protection splint, you want to put some type of surface, such as Moleskin, on the inside of the pulley protection splint. You'll remove the plastic backing and place the adhesive surface of the Moleskin onto the inside of the pulley protection splint. You'll want to leave a little bit of room on the edges of the Moleskin so that you have room and clearance to fold it over on the pulley protection splint. This will allow for full coverage to protect the finger. Here you can see a fully completed pulley protection splint, molded with the collateral bulges on the side, with Moleskin on the inside to protect breakdown of the skin while it's on the finger.
All right, so now that we've got the pulley protection splint, we're going to talk about how to put it on, where to put it on. So as you just did, you're basically just going to open it up just slightly so that you can slide it onto your finger.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if I show on my middle finger, you want it to be right in line with that joint line. Okay.
Yeah.
So for this one, just pry it open a little bit, scoot it towards the tip of your finger just a little bit. Good. So you want to make sure that before you cinch it down with the tape, you can still gently bend, because remember, this is trying to protect your tendon, so you don't want to go too crazy.
Yeah.
But so that it's right at the edge there. Now I'll show you first, and then I'll give you a piece of tape.
Cool.
You're going to take a piece of Leuko tape. You're going to tape from the bottom to the top. That's a really important step. And you're just going to stabilize with your own thumb here. You're going to stabilize the top, squeeze those together, and then apply the Leuko tape.
Sweet.
on like that.
And
okay?
squeezing pretty hard, yeah?
Yeah, you want it to be, because essentially we're approximating the tendon to the bone, so you want it to make it pretty tight. Now, with your left thumb, you're going to stabilize in the corner here.
Cool.
You're going to squeeze those pieces together, and then you're going to drag that piece of tape up and over.
Oh, no.
This is a little bit of a...
I think I should have squeezed harder.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, this is probably going to take a couple of times to get used to.
Okay.
But once you get it down nice and tight, you should be able to move a little bit. But again, remember, this is trying to limit how much force you put through that tendon and through the pulley that's healing. Good.
Cool.
Okay. And now once it's cinched, you can get a couple more wraps around that don't have to be extra tight, but it just keeps it from unraveling throughout the day.
Awesome.
Okay. Cool. How does it feel?
Feels pretty good, yeah. I have definitely limited motion there, but it sounds like that's what you want.
Yeah. And then as you, gently move, does it feel like it wants to slide back at all? Because you want it to stay pretty snug.
No. It actually feels surprisingly solid.
Okay. Excellent. Cool.
Yeah, I think the Moleskin helps a lot with that.
For sure. Definitely. So one thing that's really important just to keep in mind throughout the day, you want to make sure that you're not cutting off circulation to the finger. Now, again, remember, we have these bump outs in the pulley protection splint to prevent that.
Yeah.
But there's still a potential that, you might squeeze it a little bit in an awkward position.
Okay.
So you always want to make sure that you have capillary refill. So what you'll do is you'll press on the very tip of your finger.
Yeah.
Okay. And as long as that blanched spot, that white spot, becomes red again, you know that you have blood flow to that area. Okay. Cool. If you notice your finger becoming numb, turning a different color, going completely white, those are signs to just take it off, retape it, and make sure that it's not cutting off circulation.
Sounds good.
If you're a medical practitioner and you're watching these videos, you'll now have more information on how to use and create a pulley protection splint. If you're a rock climber and you're watching these videos, get your finger checked out by a medical practitioner, and they can take you through this process of making the splint.
Thank you guys for having me out here today. It was a very insightful process, and hopefully I'll never actually have to use this thing. Fingers crossed.
Climb on, man.
Absolutely. Thank you.